And I tried enforcing collaboration on other poets at this time as well. For instance, I discovered the work of a poet, Tom Rayworth, who I just had immense admiration for. He travels on an Irish passport, a very interesting poet. But I read down through this poem of his called Dark Senses. It's written in 4-line stanzas, and his stuff it's very hard to figure out, an explicit meaning, but it works, as it were, like music. You just let it flow over you, let the images flow, let them draw. It's sort of like film noir. It's like reading a thriller. These things, but before they develop a narrative, they dissolve again. But it struck me reading it in these 4-line stanzas that it was as though he wanted each line to have exactly 4 words in it. There are loads of the lines in it are exactly 4 words, but he didn't manage it. Sometimes he had 3 words, and sometimes he had 5 words. And so I decided I'd correct it for him. I'd make it perfect. So I added my own poem to complete each line, where if you read across his line and my line, the total is always 8, so it is right. It's perfect. I got it right. It now works. And also, it was possible to read his poem down the left-hand column and mine down the right-hand column. As you can see, there's a space between them. And you can read across each compound line. The one time we once did a reading together, and the guy who was organising it asked if we would actually perform it together. So we did, without talking about it beforehand, and he found yet another version, the bastard, to do it. He read each stanza of his, and I waited for me to read each stanza of mine. I'm going to read across each compound line. So his one is called Dark Senses, mine is called Parallel Streets. So together it's called Dark Senses, Parallel Streets. Bones show through images more opaque than tissue of friends, though they strut pressured between joints, still move in dialogue with tongue blades fluttering, in darkness what relief to accumulate some utterance. Forgive me, it's a dream, don't mention it, standing alone waving, it's easy to be fooled in search of its lost era, which spoils not just geography, forgotten in the foreclosed mind. Walking parallel streets, try to conceive the waste of tropical flames blossoming from the settled earth with a political broom to suppress the outburst, ominous as a smoke signal you needn't understand. Over a farewell meal, make small talk, avoid disturbance of dust in the dust, breath lays down, before an open window, another field of vision, weather permitting, and clarity precedent to the rain. Step sharply within, no time to lose here, the labyrinth over all meet through deepening fatigue, jingling those keys won't achieve much, dimmed by sweat, regrettably the outlines just blur. Unthinking insects click, rustle, case on case scavenging for bare subsistence, replicate the given, circulating minutes in the skeletons of organisations to the extremities, inexorably crushed by vice, the central pump stutters. They themselves go into hiding in heavy concentrations, one on top of another. Level obliterates level in their natural colours, exhibiting an astonishing mimicry, green smocks, masks and goggles, rendering discrimination vain. Taking likenesses, vowed to represent all valid subjects, to build a screen, transfix each distinct stage, alongside the trail, ideal ghost doll exactly fashioned of pearl lightbulb shards, reaching back to darkness. This curiously shaped barrier, bonding fine with foul, contains gestures and rites, offends memory and ambition. Simulated leopard skin, such odd effects are collateral smart cards and our ideas of no account. For fear of disturbing the familiar infirm ground, the pose of philosophy is an exhausted problem fashionable at the time. Their expressions were captured. They stand in complete silence, reduced to immobility. In unbroken sunlight, an extended field of whiteness, wearing masks to encompass each their private night as aids to memory for elaborating dark senses, attributed to interiors unknown, byproducts of hidden systems. They did not break the established building regulations under their own weight, level bearing, level down the experience of generations, supporting the cumulative moment, proved far more effective with a dense stratification. Acts of representation respond in manifold discrete effects. In order to survive desire, endure recurring visitations, cheated by false hopes, concentrating an intense violence in voices hardly above a whisper, phrases disfigure. Local weather prophets invoke the movements of fronts, proclaim their laws of storm against the individual radioactive rain restricted, storm raging in a cell to areas over toxic waste, possessed of spoiled. The nightmare atmosphere of ruin admitting sensory leakage washes away in up close What could you expect? Striking spatial effects predicted to attract all comers if the mask is joyful after so much. Produce a sublime gesture when several significant figures opposed to voice or action question whether pleading a system of reflections, order in direct and material interest, the necessity of ornament, can openly be countenanced. So it's, in a sense, as you gather part of the way, that if language isn't communicative, it must be capable of being used in a poem like music. And I've always loved going into a room with, good musicians, where there are a few of them gathered perhaps by chance and they have their instruments, and they can settle into playing with one another, having a dialogue, actually creating on the spot. And poets can't do this, why not? So that's what I was trying to do with that, trying to work out how can I play, even if I've only got Tom Rayworth, as it were, on recorded, can I play with him? And the last one from this book, Without Asylum, it's 3 parts to it, and in each of the parts there's a number of stanzas describing something, an act of violence of some sort. The first one is of somebody being stabbed in the back with a knife. The second one is of it's either of logging or of somebody being struck with an axe. It depends. Each of these can be run in both directions. If you think of a piece of film and think of running it backwards, you've often seen this probably with comedy routines and this sort of thing, Well, I was trying to write language that would, as it were, give you the visual images in both directions by making the words mean in different ways. For instance, a clutch. You can have a clutch of eggs, or you can have the clutch of the hand. To lay, the laying of eggs, the laying down of something. Brood, I'm brooding about something, a brood of eggs, a bird brooding on eggs. Span, the span of a wing, the span of a hand. All of these are, as you can see, partly bird and partly human. So I was trying to use all of these things. The last one is of strychnine. Looked at. And after each of these is an attempt to locate and describe an act of violence, and at the same time use the ambiguity of language to suggest who might be the agent of that violence, to explore where do these acts come out of. And then in between the first and second and the second and third sections, there were little personal stanzas. One of them was sent to me, the one that starts Shelter from the Fall. It's from a Sweeney poem that isn't part of the original text that I was translating. Somebody sent it me from England, a guy called Harry Jalonis, when I was actually writing this, and he asked me if I translated 4 lines from him. I did, and incorporated it into this poem. And then it ends off with just my own ending. So, Without Asylum. True, we may surmise how a knife hatched out of meat should fledge, span with blade, then unexpectedly take flight onto some sill, mould there with clutch of fist falling from that arm, with balance of muscles altering, to lift and lay its murderous intent and disturb dreams and brood, how everything broken, so they say, points to the unbroken. Forgetful is it what did the breaking, as I witness my own loathing and desire walk through the dreaming labyrinth of my child, while a detailed deposition state, how further on within the wood whose skew-bent registers which wind prevails itself perpetually, ragged and worn from ocean breath and sun, and every flame it quenched in its far fetch. The bright axe blossoms suddenly, the long bones lever up from it like anthers, and beyond the startling calyx of teeth, an avid, buzzing, perishable fruit, set, thicken and disintegrate, to load with sweet, secure deposits of afflicting gold. The remote cells unstipulate eventual shelter from the fall, asylum from the edge, a luminous domain unbounded. Seldom they relate why the innocent, whose mouth is like a bowl of blood, blurts words already darkened with gods and sacrifices. How I have the face of those whose faces have rotted, and although whirring blades have been observed to crystallize spontaneously throughout the native rock and ramify in gangs and casual crews, good companies exfoliate pervasive and exotic dust, where tellers and their firm controllers fight to reconcile accounts, and sound is severed from the dog's throat. There is no further testimony to the effect how in this realm of agents, deeds, and instruments one sees at last displayed an armoured beast, whose head a growth of flame in the shadow of the ripening clocks, the river Thames destroys itself. The jug absconds, leaving to the grasp only a sustained bewilderment like dice spinning.